They weren't given enough rifles, and sometimes they weren't given any at all. In World War II, entire units, resistance cells, and trapped civilians were forced to confront a brutal reality. Survival would not wait for supply lines. When factories were bombed, roads cut and commanders killed, men and women on the front lines turned inward to what they already had in their hands: shovels, bottles, cans, boots, pens, bread. Items meant for living were reshaped into tools for killing, warning, delaying, and escaping. What makes these weapon hacks unsettling isn't just their effectiveness, but how quietly they spread. No manuals, no formal training, just whispered knowledge passed trench to trench, cell to cell. Many were later banned, studied in secret, or buried with the people who used them. Today, they're rarely discussed outside academic circles, yet they remain some of the most practical examples of battlefield adaptation ever recorded. This isn't about glorifying violence. It's about understanding how humans survive when systems collapse. Stay with me through this opening, because once we move forward, we're not talking theory. We're talking what actually worked when nothing else did. The sharpened shovel became a silent close-quarters killer on frozen front lines. On the Eastern Front, where rifles froze and ammunition vanished, Soviet soldiers discovered that their entrenching tools were more reliable than firearms at arm's length. Standard-issued shovels were ground down on stones or scrap metal until the edges could cut through ice, cloth and bone. In trench raids and night assaults, these sharpened spades delivered devastating blows without sound or muzzle flash. German units quickly copied the practice, even training shovel combat techniques during winter campaigns. The lesson here is simple and still relevant. A non-threatening tool draws less attention than a weapon, and in confined spaces, leverage and silence matter more than firepower. Modern survivalists can take from this the importance of dual-use tools and edge maintenance when traditional weapons fail. Molotov fire turned civilian bottles into anti-armor weapons of desperation. The Molotov cocktail wasn't born in a lab, but on those frozen Finnish roads back in 1939. Lacking anti-tank guns, defenders filled glass bottles with gasoline and improvised accelerants, using cloth wicks to deliver fire directly onto tank engines and vision ports. Across Europe, resistance groups refined the formula using kerosene, oil, alcohol and even tar when fuel was, really scarce. These weren't precision weapons. They were panic weapons, forcing crews to abandon armoured vehicles. The practical takeaway isn't the flame itself, but the principle targeting vulnerability rather than strength. Even today, understanding how systems fail under stress is, honestly, more valuable than brute force. Partisans across Italy and Eastern Europe flattened sardine tins, packed them with scavenged powder, and rigged them with tripwires using nails and springs stolen from household items. These devices weren't meant to kill. They were alarms, distractions, and psychological weapons. A sharp crack in the night told fighters exactly when to move or escape. In modern preparedness, this translates to early warning systems built from minimal materials. Awareness buys time, and time saves lives. Inside camps and occupied cities where firearms meant execution, improvised single-shot weapons hidden inside pens became tools of escape. Constructed from pipes, springs and nails, these crude guns fired once at point-blank range, often killing a guard and allowing access to real weapons. Their power lay in concealment. Even today, history teaches that surprise and discretion often outweigh sustained firepower when resources are limited. In Poland, Greece and France, resistance fighters hollowed loaves of bread and filled them with explosives and shrapnel. Delivered as food, these devices bypassed checkpoints and struck convoys and troop gatherings. The broader lesson here is all about camouflage and, well, cultural expectation. People tend to trust what they see every day, don't they? In survival contexts, honestly, blending in is usually a lot safer than standing out. Occupied homes, more often than not, housed officers who believed themselves completely untouchable. Resistance fighters, however, sometimes wired pianos with explosives that were triggered by the keystrokes. Just one press could end lives and, spread fear far beyond the actual blast. The principle at work here is psychological warfare, altering enemy behavior simply through uncertainty. It's a stark reminder that influence doesn't always require force, just a bit of doubt. Cemeteries all across Europe became hidden supply depots. Weapons, radios and food were buried beneath graves, marked only with subtle signs that locals could understand. The lesson really endures, even in this age of surveillance. The safest place to hide something is often where no one believes any value exists. Couriers would memorize their routes, encode them into songs and rhythms, and then, destroy the physical map before ever travelling. If captured, there was absolutely nothing for the enemy to find. This method honestly reminds us that relying too much on external tools can create real vulnerability. Mental mapping remains, to this day, one of the most resilient survival skills ever used. Resistance fighters, believe it or not, embedded blades into boot soles for silent close-quarters combat. Just a single kick could incapacitate someone without ever revealing their position. The takeaway here isn't about brutality. It's about preparation. Even when stripped of all equipment, the body and clothing can still be adapted. These weren't just clever tricks. They were, in fact, the final options of people who simply refused to surrender when stripped of everything else. World War II proved, without a doubt, that survival belongs to those who adapt faster than circumstances collapse. These lessons aren't just relics, they're warnings. If you value the knowledge that history tried to bury, do subscribe to the Wartime Frontlines channel, share this with someone who takes preparedness seriously, and, keep these lessons alive before they're forgotten again.